This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. This Browns versus Ravens Week 10 game is the ultimate litmus test for if you watch football or if you be out here trying to read football. Because if you read this game, right, if you just look at the box scores, you don't watch this game, you can walk away thinking, well, that's another bad performance on the Browns defense on the road. And you could walk away thinking Deshaun Watson wasn't that impressive. The box score doesn't look that impressive. And you can kind of wipe your hands of this game and dismiss it as if nothing happened because you only read the game. And if you would do that, you look like a jackass. Because if you watch this game, like hopefully most people who attempt to talk about it actually did, which we know some of y'all don't be watching. It's cool. Not y'all that be watching the videos, but people be out there be talking about the game. If you watch this game, you would understand some very simple things. One, the defense was pretty damn good in this game. I believe they only gave up really 17 points. 14 of the Browns' points. One came off of a really impressive play that one of the Ravens safeties made to get a pick six. And then the second touchdown was off of a James Prochet fumble punt right after Myles Garrett went demon mode and got 2 sacks in a row to stop the Ravens from being able to get a field goal. Like the Browns defense did everything they could to avoid those points. Those points happened. So again, how people talk about this game, how people talk about the performances in this game will tell you if they actually watch the game. That is the first thing I have to say about this Week 10 performance. I want to talk about the Watson had a bad first half, great second half narrative, because I think there are some things that got missed in that whole conversation. I also want to talk about what the Ravens did well in that game and many other things. So let's get into it. So when it comes to that whole narrative about, oh, Deshaun Watson, yeah, he played good in the second half, but he was trash in that first half. I don't buy that narrative. Now, he wasn't great in the first half. He definitely started slow in that first quarter, started to warm up in the second quarter, but there were really some other factors that were, I think, affecting quarterback play more than Deshaun Watson's bad play was. Like, yes, were there some bad plays in this game made by Deshaun Watson specifically? Yes, especially in the first half. There were, I think, 1 or 2 that I was like, nah, Deshaun missed that, or Deshaun just didn't have the greatest throw there. He was not perfect in that first half, but he wasn't outright bad. He was just kind of average in that first half. And I think a lot of that averageness had a lot to do with just things not working around him. In the first half, I think you really missed Dwan Jones and Jed Wills. The pockets were just being a mess all day, just collapsing, folding, all type of ways. Really made Deshaun Watson miss a couple of opportunities to attack downfield when it looked like he saw it, wanted to step up, couldn't, because of the amount of pressure that was in his face. So the fact that both the starting tackles were out, I think, were one of the bigger impacts on the passing game early on, more so than Deshaun Watson's performance. Also, I think he had to deal with drops in this game. There were a couple of drops in this game. This big costly drop by David Njoku, which would probably have been a touchdown. And if David Njoku catches that ball, which he should, scores that touchdown, which he probably would have, are we really talking about this being a bad first half? And if that's the only thing that's separating this from being a bad first half, why are we acting like this was the worst first half of football of all time? This is just Deshaun Watson sensationalism all the way here with how people describe the first half. Now, the second half of this game, yeah, it's just as good as advertised. We're going to talk about that second half, but that first half narrative doesn't fly. Let's talk about what the Ravens were doing well in this game. Keaton Mitchell was killing this early, and I was wondering in this rewatch, hey, what were the Ravens doing well and what stopped in the second half of this game, because it seemed like the Ravens had no problems moving the ball on the Browns defense for most of the first half. But that second half, when you look at the 2 touchdowns the Ravens scored, they got 1 touchdown from Odell Beckham when the Browns had Denzel Ward out because of injury. So Mike Ford ended up on Odell Beckham in the slot, and Odell cooked him for a big slant touchdown. That doesn't feel like domination on offense. It just feels like, hey, you lucked out, got a big play and a busted coverage on an injured secondary. So it wasn't like they were dominating in the second half. The same thing on the second touchdown. They really had a hard time scoring off that James Prochet punt. Again, punt drop. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But the Ravens offense kind of died out. And that was because the one thing they were doing well was getting their athletes in space. The Browns had a horrible time dealing with this. Keaton Mitchell was killing us all game in the first half. It really felt like this was going to be a beatdown early on. You throw a pick six to start. Keaton Mitchell scores super easy on the ensuing drive. It feels like a disaster waiting to happen in Baltimore, somewhere we've been before. And even Zay Flowers, right, was really having his way in these one-on-one situations. I think what changed is that the Browns just started to tackle better. They started to get to their spots faster. They just started to stop those things. Like, it wasn't really any kind of complicated adjustment. The Ravens in the first half, they were breaking a lot of tackles in open space with their athletes. In the second half, they didn't, and that's why the offense couldn't move. And that's kind of the secret to beating the Baltimore Ravens, right? They only have so many ways to beat you. They're not the most loaded offense in the world. So what they try to do is get some of their athletes in space, including Lamar Jackson. But if you can tackle well against the Ravens, they don't have anything else that can just overwhelm you. And that's how you slow them down. That's what Kansas City did to them as well, right? When you take away that one-on-one opportunity, they're not really anything. They don't really have much to counter with. And that showed itself in this game. In a lot of ways, for the Browns, this game should be very encouraging, because this game is the blueprint for how you win big games in the future, right? If you're the Ravens, this game was also the blueprint on how you lose big games in the future, right? Like, this is just the same exact type of game that Kansas City played against them, right? And a lot of people give Kansas City credit for it. The Browns did it first, but this is how you beat Baltimore, and this is the blueprint to doing it. And I know we say that a lot whenever a team beats somebody, but like, literally, this is the blueprint, because this is how every other team that beat Baltimore for the rest of the season went about doing it. Short passes, short tackling, just possession after possession. That's how you beat Baltimore. So that was interesting to see the Browns struggle with. Now, there were some standout defensive performers. Obviously, Myles Garrett was great in this game. Myles Garrett is great in almost every game. I'm not doing a rewatch series, so you can find out that the defensive player of the year was good at football. So if it feels like I just kind of skip over what Myles is doing in these games, it's because I talked thoroughly during the season about what Myles did. What this rewatch series is for me to point out what other guys are doing that aren't Myles Garrett, right? In this game, I felt like Grant Delpit was really good in this game. I think he went out halfway through, or by the end of the third quarter, he was out the game, which really did affect things for the Cleveland Browns. But he was great in this game, played a very solid one. And Sione Takitaki, we got to talk about it, man. Like, how are we going to replace that role for Sione Takitaki? Is that going to be Jordan Hicks? Like, he had a really important role on this team, and he played it really well. And it feels like we just kind of went this whole offseason just brushing by the fact that we're not going to have Sione Takitaki anymore. And I feel like that's one of the most significant things that we're going to be missing on the defensive side of the ball. Now, again, I don't want to make it seem like we lost an all-pro player or anything, and maybe I'm making it sound that way, but he is a really good role player, and you're going to need somebody to be a really good role player. Maybe that could be Jordan Hicks, but you know, it wasn't just something I can assume you're going to replace. He came in big in some big moments as well. There's a clutch factor there with him. So at the start of the second half, you have to remember Denzel Ward got hurt. Mike Ford is in the slot. And the Browns secondary, it's just got tore up in this game. Not like by the Ravens offense, just by injury. They were down to by the fourth quarter. They did not have Grant Delpit. They did not have Juan Thornhill. They did not have Denzel Ward. They were down all three of those guys. You also have to remember, not only were they down Denzel Ward, during practice, Cam Mitchell got hurt. So you were also down your backup nickel, which meant that Mike Ford had to play a lot. And we saw Mike Ford play this year. We know he's not the greatest cover corner in the world. One of the things I touched on in the beginning, if you just look at the box score for this game, you can be convinced that the Browns defense did not play well on the road here. Could not be further from the truth. They absolutely dominated quarters 2, 3, and 4. And the only time that they let somebody score, it was really on some fluke shit. Like, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, there's no more elegant way to describe that than that. Like, this wasn't one of those games where Lamar Jackson was just doing whatever he wanted, especially in the second half. This was like, hey, if the Ravens got lucky, they could score, but it really took them getting lucky in order to score. Either it be Mike Ford matched up against Odell, or James Prochet dropping a punt, or, you know, somebody just completely forgetting their assignment on the left side, so Keaton Mitchell just walks in. Like, that's what it took for the Ravens to score. Nothing was easy for them outside of the first quarter, and it showed. The Browns defense was excellent in this game. I don't care how many points they gave up. And again, they didn't really give up all those points. But yeah, the Browns defense, they get a bad rap for some of these road games when they actually played well. There are a couple of important drives in this game. I want to make sure I go over some of these important drives. So halfway through the third quarter, the Browns go on this crazy 10-play drive to get back in the game and really set the tone for the comeback that's coming in the fourth quarter. A thing to note in that comeback drive is this is the first time all season where the Browns would use David Njoku in a similar way that they used them for the rest of the season. Like, this drive, I really think they figured out how to use David Njoku. And everything they did with David Njoku after that built off of what worked in this drive. So it wasn't just a key drive because you scored, brought yourself back in, nickel and dime the Ravens defense, kind of showed the blueprint on how to beat them. It was really important because you figured out how to use David Njoku during this drive. And this is why I say I don't really buy the narrative that David Njoku was so much better just because Joe Flacco was playing at quarterback versus Deshaun Watson. Because what I think actually happened was they figured out something with David Njoku in this game, but then Deshaun Watson got hurt. I think if Deshaun Watson stays healthy, from what we saw in this game, he's very capable of using David Njoku in that same way. You can seeing that at that moment really does give me a lot of encouragement when it comes into going into next year, because I think, oh, yeah, Deshaun can do that exact same thing that worked with David Njoku, because Deshaun is the one who figured that out with David Njoku, or at least was on the field when they figured it out with David Njoku. And look, if for the rest of this game, they use David Njoku like that, and he is dominant for this team in the rest of this game. But that was the start of how the Browns would better use David Njoku. And even in the games where DTR played, you could see that they were trying to use David like that, but DTR was just throwing them balls way too hard for David to catch. And it took till Joe Flacco came in, threw some catchable balls, and they were able to really build on what worked with David Njoku in this game. Very interesting to see that. The Browns get that long drive. On defense, Myles Garrett goes crazy, and you could just feel the momentum changing, right? The Browns score, they bring this thing back in within, one or two scores, and then Myles Garrett goes full Myles Garrett, 2 back-to-back sacks, and it feels like it's about to be Browns world. And then James Prochet fumbles this punt, and what follows this fumbled punt is one of the weirdest goal lines sets I've ever seen in my life. Let me describe this to you. So first, the Browns actually do force a 3rd and 9 and get the stop on 3rd down. So it looks like they're going to get off the field here with a field goal attempt, which is amazing because I think James Prochet fumbled that ball at like the 6-yard line. So the Ravens were 6 yards away from scoring. Then on that third down play where they make the stop, the refs decide to call what is a pretty questionable holding call on Greg Newsome. Or then on the exact next play, Justice Hill scores for a touchdown, but then they get a hold. Okay, even weirder, whatever. So it goes back to like the 12-yard line. So now it's 2nd and 12 to go. And the Ravens get a false start on 2nd and 12 to go. So now it's 2nd and 17 to go. And the Browns force another third down in that situation. The play ends with Ronnie McLeod getting an interception, but then the Browns get called for holding. And this time, this was a more obvious holding call, which brings us back to 1st and goal. And the Ravens finally score on the second 3rd and goal of this set. Now, some of you may ask, hey, Quincy, if all that happened, can you still blame that touchdown on James Prochet? Yes. Here's the very simple reason why. If James Prochet just catches the punt, dog, we don't have to see any of that shit. So it's absolutely James Prochet's fault because the Browns got off the field. They forced the punt. James Prochet dropped it, forced the defense back on the field with no rest, and that happened. So yes, that touchdown is still on on James Prochet, not really on the defense. Anything that the defense would have did there would have been a bonus. So the Browns give up a bonus touchdown, and they're in a tough spot. And this is where this game goes from, hey, Deshaun's actually playing pretty good, to, hey, this is one of the better games better performances Deshaun Watson has had in his career. And it has nothing to do with the stats. It has everything to do with the context of the game. Again, if you read this game, you could be fooled into thinking that this was not that impressive. If you watch this game and you understood the context of this game, it was very impressive. Deshaun Watson makes this comeback in the 4th quarter with a broken shoulder that would end his season, a high ankle sprain, while also playing with 2 backup tackles. This is impressive, what he does here, because not only do the Browns need to score following that whole mess of the James Prochet fumbled punt, they need to score quick. Deshaun Watson at this point has a broken shoulder. It's hard to score quick when your throwing shoulder is broken, but they make that drive to stay in the game, and he makes several key throws to make that happen. I cannot tell you how impressive that is by itself. It's crazy. This drive starts with a 1st down sack. He ends up in like 2nd and 19, and he just fires back with like an 18-yard completion on 2nd down to convert the 1st down. It was just incredible to do that if you're considering what is actually going on with him physically. Just big plays in the passing game with a broken shoulder and a high ankle sprain, right? He breaks out for this touchdown to Elijah Moore where he breaks a tackle, runs, finds Elijah Moore. Again, this has to be incredibly hard to do when your body is in the condition that Deshaun Watson's is. And again, they're playing on the road against the 1 seed, against the toughest defense in the NFL that they're allowed to play against because they can't play their own defense. The fact that people try to make this game seem unimpressive is hilarious to me because, again, some of y'all, well, not some of y'all, I hope y'all watch the games, but some people who want to argue about sports want to do everything but watch the damn sport. And this game and how people talk about this game is just proof of that. Very impressive drive there to bring the Browns back into it. And doing that, having those drives in games like this is how you become or you earn the title of franchise quarterback. Now, one performance in a Cleveland Browns uniform does not make that of Deshaun Watson, but if he does that more this season, he's clearly a franchise quarterback. The Browns on the other side get some support for the offense. They get a pick 6. They play some complimentary football. Shout out to Obo Okoronkwo, who got the deflection. Again, Obo, really valuable for this football team. Underrated guy as well. Then what I found even more impressive than just getting the pick 6 on the ensuing defensive set where they have to go out there after all the energy of getting a pick six. They force a punt, which, hey, not everybody does, but they forced the punt to keep the difference, which gave the Cleveland Browns the ball, which gave them the opportunity to drive and end this game. And that's what Deshaun Watson did. He closed this game. Again, the drive kind of starts out with the fumble. He fires back on 2nd and 19, does his thing again with a broken shoulder, high ankle sprain. Then he gets this huge run to put the Browns in field goal position. And this was massive. They needed that first down. They needed that field position. And in order to get it, he rams a broken shoulder into the chest of Pat Queen to make sure it happens. But if that performance was done by any other quarterback that we are more comfortable talking about than Deshaun Watson, because I understand why nobody wants to like build him a parade for having a good game or anything. But if like Joe Burrow had that game, we would have called that game what it was, which is one of the most impressive performances of the year. You can tell me about the stat sheet. I don't give a fuck about the stat sheet when it comes to this game. What he did in that context is something that we have never seen a Cleveland Browns quarterback do, right? Battle through that level of injury, not just on your offensive line, but in your body itself. Come back down 14 against the Baltimore Ravens on the road in a year where the Baltimore Ravens are the 1 seed and the best defense outside of you in football, and find a way to win that game despite all of the injuries. Despite all of the things going on with him, despite the fact that the injuries were so bad that he sustained in this game that he would not play another down this season. Still winning that game in a comeback effort on the road. That is one of the 5 most impressive quarterback performances of the season. If this were Jalen Hurts, if this were Joe Burrow, if this were a quarterback who people like more, we would understand that. But since this is Deshaun Watson, you can lie. And since people can lie, we acted like this shit ain't impressive. I'm sorry. This is impressive. I'm not about to sit here and lie about football to y'all. If it wasn't impressive, I would tell you this shit was impressive. This was very impressive. And this is why the locker room has not wavered on Deshaun Watson or bought into the whole Joe Flacco's better nonsense. They didn't waver on that whole thing because they saw this game. They watched this. You hear David and Njoku talk about it. Like, this is the game that they saw. This is why they still think Deshaun Watson is still that guy, because in this moment, he did prove that he still has that guy in him. Can he do it consistently? We will see. Hopefully this season. But that guy is still there in Deshaun Watson, and that's what this game proved to me. But that's my thoughts on this Week 10 rewatch. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.